This is Google Sheets for Beginners, the complete course. In this video, I will teach you everything you need to know to get started using Google Sheets effectively. And this video will continue to be relevant for years, maybe decades to come, because the principles of spreadsheets and of Google Sheets in particular that I will be sharing do not change often, if ever. This is going to be fun. Let's get started. In this first segment of Google Sheets for Beginners, the complete course, I will show you how to begin a new spreadsheet, how to create it, and then also how to think about the different parts of a spreadsheet. So let's jump right in to creating a new spreadsheet. You can see that here I already have a new blank spreadsheet ready to go. But if you don't, there are a couple of ways to begin a new spreadsheet. Probably the most standard, most common way to do so is to go to Google Drive. drive.google.com, and look here in the upper right to make sure that you're signed in to your Google account. From there, you can just click New and Google Sheets blank spreadsheet, and that will give you a brand new, completely blank Google Sheet. Now, there's another, faster in many cases, way to create a new spreadsheet, and that is simply go here to the address bar in your browser and type in sheets.new. Tap Enter. And this skips a step or two. It takes you right in to Google Sheets and gives you a blank, untitled spreadsheet. Okay, once you have your spreadsheet and want to start building it, it's very important to know what I call the anatomy of a spreadsheet. There just are certain parts or components of a spreadsheet that you just need to know. And there is specific terminology that's going to come in handy. If you don't know the terminology in Google Sheets, everything's going to be harder. So let's start with the anatomy of a spreadsheet. If you look across the top of this spreadsheet, you'll notice a series of letters, alphabetically ordered. Each of those letters corresponds to a column, and that's the first term that you need to learn in Google Sheets is column. Each column, you'll notice, has a letter or letters assigned to it. So this is column E, and when I click on E, the entire column is highlighted or selected. This is column L, and if I keep browsing to the right, it goes all the way to Z. This is column Z, and so each column has a column letter. Here at the left, you'll notice a series of numbers. Each row has a number, and that's the second term that you need to know in Google Sheets, and that is row. So this is row 3, this is row 11, this is row 18. Now, if we combine columns and rows, something really powerful happens. The combination of a column and a row gives you a cell. So for example, this cell that I've selected is cell D6. The column is D, the row is 6. And the reason I said this is a powerful feature in a spreadsheet is that because of this, we can give every location in the spreadsheet, every cell or range of cells, we can give it a name. I can identify each of these boxes, each of these rectangular cells in Google Sheets. So the name of this cell is I10, the name of this cell is C2, and so forth. As you continue through this course, you'll see more examples of why that is powerful and how it can be useful. Okay, so we have 3 terms so far. We have column, we have row, and then the intersection of a column and a row gives us cell. The next term you need to learn is range. A range is a group of cells. And similar to individual cells, we can name ranges. So I've clicked and dragged to select a range. The name of this range is D2 through H13. And that's the proper way to name it, and you should always follow that pattern. You start in the upper left corner of the range and name that cell in the upper left corner. Then you say through and name the lower right corner of the range, H13. Now in Google Sheets, when you're writing formulas, you're going to have to describe ranges fairly frequently. In Google Sheets, when you need to name a range or describe a range, let's say for a formula, the way you would write that out is the cell in the upper left corner, colon, and then the cell in the lower right corner. The colon signifies through in this case. So D2 colon H13 signifies D2 through H13. Now, to make our Google Sheets vocabulary complete, there are a couple more terms we need to learn. All of the cells that you can see here, plus many more that are hidden below and that are to the right, all of these together make up a sheet. And you'll see that it's named here in the lower left corner, sheet 1. All of the cells, all of the rows and columns make up a sheet. Now it is possible to have more than one sheet. I'll click here in the lower left corner to add a second sheet. And the collection of sheets that you have makes up what we call a workbook. This particular workbook now consists of 3 sheets. Now, there are some synonyms that you'll hear sometimes. Sometimes instead of saying sheet, people will say worksheet or spreadsheet. Those are all synonyms. But those are pretty much all of the terms that you need to learn to have a good vocabulary and understand the anatomy of a spreadsheet. Now, in addition to the anatomy of a spreadsheet, Google Sheets has its own components and parts that you need to learn. For example, across the top, we have some menus. If I click on File, I get a list of options and tools and features. If I click on Edit, I get other options, tools, and features. Same with View, Insert, and all of the rest. So these menus are where a lot of the powerful features in Google Sheets can be found and accessed. We also have some formatting tools here. We can change the font size, all of these other formatting options that we have. And there are some other tools here as well, like an undo and redo. So when using Google Sheets, you'll find yourself coming up here quite often to use the menus and these formatting options here on this toolbar. Let's look to the upper right. Here in the upper right area of Google Sheets, one of the most important things that we have here is the Share button. If I click the Share button, it brings up options for me to share this spreadsheet with others. And later in this course, I will show you specifically how this works. But for now, just know that that's where you can go to easily share your spreadsheets, your workbooks with others. On each side of the Share button, we have some powerful tools. We have a button here to join a call, a Google meeting, basically. And this could be helpful, like it says here, if you want to present this Google Sheet to a group of people in a call. Next to that, we have a comments button. This is particularly useful if you are collaborating with someone else on your Google Sheet. You can make comments back and forth and see each other's comments. Another helpful feature, especially when collaborating with others, is this button. If I click it, it'll show the versions of this document. Each major change is listed here, and as I add to the spreadsheet, make changes, if I click here, those changes will be represented, and I can go back at any time to a previous version and then click Restore this version if I need to. On the right side of the Share button, we have Ask Gemini. Now, if you use Google Sheets through your school or through the company that you work for, you may not see Ask Gemini. It's being rolled out gradually, so you may not have that yet. But this is a way to bring in artificial intelligence into your spreadsheet. Now let's look at the right side of Google Sheets. Here we have a list of integrations that Google gives me between Google Sheets and other Google products. If you use Google Keep, for example, which is a wonderful tool, you should watch my video on that tool, you can click here to tap into your Google Keep account. And you can bring in content and interact with it from Google Keep, even though you're working in Google Sheets. Same with Google Calendar, there's a task list, maps, and more. Finally, let's look here. Above the spreadsheet itself, we have two powerful pieces of the anatomy of Google Sheets. Here we have what's called the name box in the upper left. When you click on a cell, the name box will display the name of that cell, B3, H10. What about a range? When I click and drag to highlight a range, the name box tells me what the name of that range is. Now, there's more that you can do with the name box, so keep watching, but it's a powerful feature. And the last piece of the anatomy of Google Sheets is the formula bar. You find it here, and the formula bar will always tell you what the contents of a particular cell are. So in this case, I just have gibberish in that cell, and it shows me that here. Later in this course, I will teach you how to create simple formulas. For example, I want to add 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Tap Enter. Cell E2 now looks like it has the number 10 in it. But if I select E2, I can look at the formula bar to see that that's not really the case. It looks like there's 10 in E2, but actually there's a formula that produces the number 10. So the Google Sheets formula bar can really help us, especially when we're working with formulas. So in this segment of Google Sheets for Beginners, the complete course, I've taught you the anatomy of a spreadsheet with columns, rows, cells, and ranges. And then I also taught you the anatomy of Google Sheets, looking at menus, toolbars, options, the name box, and the formula bar. In the next segment of Google Sheets for Beginners, the complete course, I will teach you how to enter cell values and data in Google Sheets. In this next segment of Google Sheets for Beginners, the complete course, you will learn how to enter cell values and data into Google Sheets. This, in a lot of ways, is the heart of Google Sheets. And let's pretend that I work for a small business. I've been asked to create a payroll spreadsheet for the employees. Let's say here in column A, I want to put in the employees' ID numbers, column B, their names, column C, other information about them like maybe what department that they work for, etc. And in Google Sheets, anytime you want to insert data or other information into a cell, it's important that you first select the cell or click on it. There's a wonderful way to remember this, and that is select to affect. If I want to affect this spreadsheet at all, I first must select something. So D2, I've selected it, now I can affect it. I can type or change its formatting or do a few other things to affect the spreadsheet and specifically this cell. If I don't select it, nothing's going to really affect it. So try to remember that. Select to affect. So let's say I want to affect cell A1. I need to click on it to select it, and now I'm ready to affect cell A1. Let's say the first employee that I want listed here has an employee ID number of 1001. Because I've selected A1, I can type 1001. So now it looks like 1001 is stored in cell A1. That's not exactly true yet, though. To make it really be stored there, I need to tap Enter or Return on the keyboard, and now cell A1 is no longer blank. It has the number 1001 stored in that cell. Now notice when I tapped Enter that the active cell moved down one. You can always tell the active cell because it is highlighted. You'll notice a box around it with a little circle in the corner. So when I typed in 1001, tapped Enter, the active cell moved down. And that's perfect because that's where I want to type the next employee's ID number, 1002. Tap Enter, and the active cell moves down again. And now I could type 1003, 1004, and so on. I could just keep on doing this for all 500 employees. But that is kind of a repetitive task, and fortunately, Google Sheets has a built-in feature that makes this unnecessary. You don't have to keep typing in one number after the next. That feature is called the fill handle, and you'll find the fill handle in the lower right corner of a selected cell or even range. It's this little blue circle. Now, the way this works is the fill handle, it's used to quickly replicate data, formulas, or extend a pattern or a series. So for example, if I select A4 and then click and hold the click on the fill handle, I'll just drag down and look what happens. It's copying the contents of cell A4 all the way down as far as I asked it to copy paste them. In this case, that's not what I want. I don't want a lot of 1004. I want the pattern that I've established here to be extended. So for that, I'm going to click and drag to show Google Sheets the pattern that I want. Each time I go down a cell, this number gets one higher. So with that pattern shown to Google Sheets by highlighting it, I can go to the fill handle, click and drag down the spreadsheet, and I'll go all the way down to row 50, and I'll release the mouse button, and you can see what it did. Google Sheets understood the pattern and extended it because I used the fill handle. Now, what if the pattern were a little different? What if it was 1001, 1003, 1005? I could click and drag to show Google Sheets that pattern, use the fill handle, drag down, and that pattern is extended. Next, I'm going to click on cell B1 because I want to affect cell B1. With it selected, with it clicked upon, I'm going to type the first employee's name. I'll tap Enter, and I'll type the next employee's name. Tap Enter. And each time I tap Enter or Return, it moves me down to the cell below. I'll type Amy in this case, tap Enter. Now, as I'm entering in data, names, whatever it might be, into Google Sheets, there may be times when I need to go back and correct my work. So for example, John in this case is missing an H. Let's say John spells his name with an H in there. I want to correct that, and this gives me the opportunity to teach you the difference between clicking on a cell and clicking in a cell. As you work in Google Sheets, there will be times when you need to be on a cell, and there are times when you'll need to be in a cell. The way you get on a cell is simply by clicking once on that cell. So I'm on this cell. If I want to be on B2, I just click once on B2. I'm on the cell. When you're on a cell, anything that you type will erase what already exists in that cell. So if I need to, I can type in John again and spell it correctly, and it's fixed when I tap Enter. I'm going to undo that though, because I want you to see that if you click twice on a cell, double click on it, now you're inside the cell. Notice the flashing cursor after the N in John. So now when I type, it's not going to overwrite what already exists in the cell. I could add to what's already there, or I could use the arrow keys or the mouse to get to a specific place in the cell to make a correction. This is going to be very important when you're doing data entry in Google Sheets. You're going to need to sometimes be in the cell, sometimes on the cell. Any changes that you make are only recorded once you tap Enter, or alternatively, you could tab out of the cell, or you could click away from the cell. Those are all ways to kind of record the changes that you've made in that cell. Now, so far in this segment of the course, I've been focused on, as you enter data into Google Sheets, on the fact that when you tap Enter, you move down the spreadsheet. And that's that's true, but what if you find yourself needing to move up the spreadsheet? Of course, you could use the mouse and just click, but you'll find as you use Google Sheets more and more, you're going to want to keep your hands on the keyboard as much as possible. It will make you much more efficient in your use of Google Sheets. So Enter moves down, but if I hold Shift and tap Enter, it moves me up. And sometimes you end up having to tap Enter twice to get it to move up. But this is going to be very helpful to you as you do data entry in Google Sheets. Enter moves down, Shift Enter moves up. Now, what about right and left? I already mentioned tab. If you tap tab, it moves you to the right, and I can tab over as much as I want. If I need to move left, you probably guessed it, it's Shift tab, and that moves you quickly to the left. So I would like to put in the hourly wage for each of these employees, and I want that to go into column C. So I'm going to tap tab to move over to column C, and I'll put in Julia's hourly wage. I'll tap enter, and you'll notice that Google Sheets, sometimes when you tap enter or return, it'll move you down and to the left at times. So I'll tab over again. John's hourly wage, let's say, is 14. I'll tab over. Amy's is 20, and I'll tap enter. Give me a minute to finish filling out the list of employees and their hourly wages, and I'll resume the video. Next, I need to show you how to copy and clear Google Sheets data. In most cases, the easiest way to copy data from one cell to another is to click on the cell that has the data you need, hold Control, and tap C to copy. Now, if you're on a Mac computer, it would be Command C. Now that I've copied it, I just go to where I want to paste that data, and I hold Control and tap V to paste. Now, there are other ways to do this. You can go to the Edit tab after selecting a cell or range of cells, and you can choose Copy and do it that way, and Paste. But most people will find it easiest to use the keyboard shortcut, Control C or Command C on a Mac. In order to clear a Google Sheets cell, again, there are a couple of ways you could do this. Probably the most common way is just to click on a cell and tap Delete or Backspace on the keyboard, and it clears the value out of the cell. Having said that, there are sometimes other aspects of a cell that do not get cleared when you just tap Delete. In cases like that, you may need to go here to the menu bar and click on Format and choose Clear Formatting. So let's look at an example. If I bold cell C3, and then if I click on C3 and tap Delete, it gets rid of the value, but then later, anything that's typed in that cell, it still has the formatting that I selected earlier. Well, I want to clear that formatting, so I click on cell C3, select to effect, and then I go to Format, choose Clear Formatting, and it's cleared. So those are a couple of ways that you can clear data that's in Excel, either the data itself or its formatting. Okay, next, in column D, I want to put in the number of hours that each of these employees worked in the last month. So I'll tab over to column D, cell D1, and I'll type in, let's say 150 for Julia. I'll tap enter. Now, as I'm working, you may be realizing that there's a little bit of a problem developing. The more data, the more information I put into my Google Sheet, the harder it is to remember what each of these pieces of data means. What is this? 1001? What's this? What does the 35 mean? What does the 150 mean? That shows why we need column headings. So I would like to insert a row above row number 1 and put in some headings so I always know what this number represents, what this number represents, and this number. To insert a row, there are a few different ways you can do that in Google Sheets. But one of the most common is right-click on the row number that's below the row you want to insert. So I want to insert a row at the very top. So I'll right-click on row number 1. Then I'll choose Insert One Row Above. Now there are times when you'll want to insert a column as well. To do so, just right-click on the column that's to the right of where you want the new column to appear. So I'll right-click on column A, and I'll choose Insert One Column to the Left. Now you'll notice that there is also the option one to the right, and same with rows, there was an option to insert one below or above, but in most cases, you are going to want to pick the one that's just to the right of where you want to insert the column. Now, what if I wanted to insert a row here between Zoe and Mateo? That's okay, I can do that. I could right-click on the 8, choose Insert One Row Above, and now there's a blank row between them. I'm going to hold Control and tap Z a couple of times to undo a couple of those changes that I put into this spreadsheet. Okay, so now that I've created a blank row at the top of my data, I can click on cell A1 and type in a heading for this column. Let's call this column Employee Number. I'll tap Tab to move over to B1, and I'll type Name, tab over, Hourly Wage, tab over, and hours worked, and I'll tap enter. And actually, I want to add one more column heading here in column E. So in this case, I just clicked on column E, and I'll type taxable income, tap enter. Now you'll notice as I've entered in these column headings, some of them don't really fit in the space provided. So employee number looks like employee num. And some of these other column headings are really short, and yet there's a lot of space provided. So let's fix this. When you're working with columns and also rows in Google Sheets, there will be times when you need to resize the column or row. There is a manual way to do so and an automatic way. So let's do the manual way first. If I want to just stretch out column A, I can put my mouse between column A and column B. There's a line separating those two columns, and I can put my mouse on that line, click, and then drag it out to be as wide as I want it to be or as narrow as I want it to be. When I get it to the width I want, just release the mouse button, and I've set the column width. And I could do that with each of these columns, but check out this faster, basically automatic way of resizing columns. I'm going to click on column A, and I'll hold the click and drag all the way across to E. So I click on A, drag all the way to E. With all of that highlighted, I'm going to double click between any two of these column letters. So I'll choose between C and D, but it doesn't really matter. And I'll just double click on the line, and notice what happened. Every column has been perfectly resized automatically to fit all of the data in the column. So that looks much better. Now, having said that, what if you didn't do this? What if you left the columns so that the information that's in them doesn't fit? It looks like it's spilling out into other cells, or it's just hidden. That actually is fine. It would not change how the data is treated. It wouldn't change how Google Sheets calculates formulas or anything like that. It just makes it a little harder for us humans to understand the data and to use the spreadsheet. So I do recommend resizing your columns so that the data is easy to see and understand. Now, as you're entering data in Google Sheets, there will be times when you'll need some help. And a great Google Sheets tool that can help you with that is called Find and Replace. So for example, in this spreadsheet, let's say that I need to go in and change some of the hourly wages. Let's say a new law has been passed so that the new minimum wage is $12 an hour. I could manually look through this spreadsheet, find any example of $10 or $11 an hour, and update it to 12. But there's a much faster way. Just go here to Edit and choose Find and Replace. I want to find any examples of 10 and replace it with 12. There are some other options I have here, and here's an example of 10. Watch what happens when I click Replace All. This will replace values on all sheets. Are you okay with that? Are you sure? Yeah, I only have information on one sheet anyway, but I'll click OK, and notice that the number was updated from 10 to 12. I could do the same thing now with 11. Notice that Sienna has an hourly wage of 11, but when I click Replace All, it changes to 12. Now, in this example, I'm only working with 23 employees, but imagine 1,000 employees, or 1,500, or 5,000 employees. Find and Replace can be hugely valuable and save you so much time. So that worked great. I'll click Done. Now, if you want to keep your hands on the keyboard, which is usually a good idea, instead of going up to Edit and choosing Find and Replace, you can just hold Control and tap H to bring up Find and Replace. Okay, there's one more thing I want to show you about entering and managing your data in Google Sheets, and that is how to move data. So I've already shown you how to copy data. You can click on a cell, Control-C to copy, Control-V to paste. You can also cut data. Click on a cell, Control-X, or Command-X if you're on a Mac computer, but Control-X to cut, click Control-V to paste. So those are useful, and you're going to use them a lot in Google Sheets. But there's another way to move data instead of copying or cutting, and that is you can click and drag to highlight a range of data that you want to move, and then put your mouse on the edge of that range of data. So any of these edges. I'll go with this bottom edge. Notice that the mouse pointer turns into a hand. That's indicating that you can pick up that data and move it. So I'll hold the click and drag the information over here, release the mouse button, and I've effectively moved that data from one location in Google Sheets to another. I'm going to hold Control and tap Z to undo that, but that's a very handy way to move data in Google Sheets. So those are the techniques that you need to know to effectively enter cell values and manage your data in Google Sheets. In this next segment of Google Sheets for Beginners, the complete course, I will teach you how to create formulas inside Google Sheets. And for many people, when they hear the word formula or function, they get nervous. They think it's going to be hard. I want to tell you, you will be able to understand this. You're going to be able to make it work for you. So let's get into it. Now, you may have noticed here in column D, I've added a few random numbers, one for each of the employees, to represent their hours worked. And I would like to now figure out the taxable income for each employee. Of course, I could just estimate it, or I could calculate it in my head. If I were good at math, I could do, let's say, 14 times 122, and I could just type in the answer, which I have no idea what that would be. But I struggle a bit with multiplication of larger numbers. Fortunately, Google Sheets is excellent at this. In addition to being a spreadsheet program, Google Sheets also is a calculator, and it has all of the typical functions and operators that you would find in a physical calculator. This is what Google Sheets was made to do, to calculate this kind of stuff. So I'm going to click on cell E2 to write my first formula. And in Google Sheets, anytime you're going to create a formula, you need to start with an equals. So you click on a cell and you type equals. Now, when I was first learning how to use Google Sheets and also Microsoft Excel, this was a challenge for me. I really struggled to remember to start with an equals sign. Well, now I never forget. And the reason why is I think back to my days in school when I was studying algebra. In my algebra class that I took when I was young, I remember that there were variables. And the variables were part of formulas. And I would see formulas like y equals a divided by 3, stuff like that, or x equals y minus 10, all sorts of fancy formulas that I needed to try to solve. Okay, well, this is similar to that. The variable is this cell. So this cell, E2, is equal to something. And so still to this day, when I use Google Sheets and when I go in to create a formula, in my mind, I think this cell equals, and I type an equals sign. Now that I have my equals in cell E2, I can put in the formula, and I could just type 35 multiplied by, and multiplied is symbolized by the asterisk symbol. So 35 multiplied by 150. Now you'll notice that Google Sheets is giving me a preview of the answer, 5,250. But this formula is not completed until I tap enter on the keyboard or tab or click away. So I'll tap enter, 5,250. My formula is now entered into this cell. So that's one way to enter a formula in Excel. Just click on a cell, equals, and then type out your formula. And it's not just asterisk for multiplication. You can also do plus. So I can add 65 and 199, tap enter. It calculates it. Of course, you can use the minus sign. You can use / for divided by. And so you can certainly type out your formulas like that by just using those symbols and numbers. But there's a better way to do formulas in Google Sheets. And you'll find that it's faster and more accurate. Again, clicking on E2, I'll type equals, but this time I'm going to click on cell C2, and then I'll type asterisk to multiply it by D2. Tap enter. And I get the same result, but without having to type 35 and 150. I just clicked on those cells. This is superior. If for no other reason, it means that you don't have to rely on yourself typing correctly without errors. Now, because I set up the formula this way, referencing cell C2 and D2, look what Google Sheets has done. It's figured out that I probably want to do the same thing with all of these other rows in the sheet. And so it's suggesting an autofill. To autofill, I can click the checkbox or hold Control and tap Enter. So I'll do that, and all of the rest of the formulas are entered in and the work is done. Now I'm going to hold Control and tap Z to undo this. I'll do that a couple of times because I want you to see that there's yet another way to create that formula. I'm going to type equals. This time, instead of using the mouse to click on cell C2, I'm just going to type it in. C2 asterisk D2. Tap Enter, and the results are the same. The difference is I'm keeping my hands on the keyboard. Once again, I can autofill if I'd like, and the work is done. Now watch and learn. Now watch, and I'll show you another reason why this second and also third methods that I taught you are superior to the first. One of the reasons is that the formula is, in a way, dynamic, meaning if I change the hourly wage, let's say I realize Julia actually deserves a much higher hourly wage, maybe $45 an hour, I tap enter on the keyboard and the taxable income changes. Because I reference these cells, if I change those cells, it changes the result of the formula. Now, just a quick reminder, it looks like column E now has a whole bunch of numbers in it, and I understand why you would think that that's the case, but actually, column E is full of formulas. If I double click on E3, for example, I can see the true nature of the contents of cell E3. It's a formula. Now, the results of the formula produce 1708, but what's really in that cell is a formula. A shortcut to help you always know what is in a particular cell in Google Sheets is you can select a cell and then look here at the formula bar. This will always show you the true nature of the contents of a cell. Okay, there are two more things you need to know about creating formulas in Google Sheets before we move on to learning functions. The first of those two things is it's important to know that sometimes your formulas will produce errors. Here in F2, I'm going to type equals, and I'm going to click on taxable income and try dividing it by 0. That's not really possible, and so when I tap enter, I get an error message. If I put my mouse over the error message, it'll tell me what it is. It cannot be divided by 0. So if you ever enter a formula in Google Sheets and you get some sort of error message like this, that's okay. It's actually a good thing. This is Google Sheets trying to warn me that I've made a mistake, and it's trying to coach me to help me know how to fix that error. All right, the last concept that I need to teach you in this segment of the course is that it's possible to name a cell or a range in Google Sheets. And I talked about this a little bit earlier, but just as a reminder, I can click on a cell, for example, this one, and then I can go here in the upper left to the name box, and then I can change the name that's in there to something else. Let's say I want this cell to be the total of all of the cells above it. I could name this cell total taxable income. Tap enter, and you'll notice I did not put spaces in the name box. If you try putting in a space and tapping enter, you're going to get an error message. So now that I've named this cell E25 total taxable income, whenever I click on it, that's what shows in the name box. Now, this will be very important later in your Google Sheets journey. It's going to become a very powerful tool for you to be able to name a specific cell. You can also name a range of cells. So I'll click and drag to highlight this entire range, and I'll call this employee information. And this time, instead of putting in a space or not putting in a space, I'm going to put an underscore in there. That's a pretty common practice with the name box. So in this segment, I've taught you how to create formulas in Google Sheets. Now this gets even more exciting in our next segment. Now these concepts that I've taught you about formulas, they're going to get even more powerful and exciting in the next segment of the course. In this next segment of Google Sheets for Beginners, the complete course, I will teach you how to add functions into your formulas. And this is where formulas get really powerful and exciting. Let's jump right in. And there's a common misconception with Google Sheets and also Excel. A lot of people believe that the term function and the term formula are interchangeable. And if you listen to other YouTube videos on Google Sheets, you'll hear that mistake a lot. People calling formulas functions and vice versa. But there's a definite difference, and I think you'll understand that as we continue in this segment. The first function that I'm going to teach you is the sum function, and it's one of the most common functions. And to show you this more effectively, I'm going to go up here to the upper left and use the zoom selector to zoom to 150%. And I'm going to browse down to the bottom of my data set. Let's say that I would like to calculate the total number of hours worked by all of the employees and the total taxable income for the entire workforce. To do that, I could use the sum function. So I'm going to click here on D25 and start my formula with an equals. This cell equals, and check it out. Google Sheets is anticipating what I might want here. Now, it's not always right. Sometimes it guesses wrong, so you need to learn to do this yourself. But from time to time, with artificial intelligence that's now built into many versions of Google Sheets, it will guess the formula that you'll need in a particular cell. Now that I've typed equals, let's use the first function, and it's sum. Now the proper way to type out a function is in all caps. Functions are always indicated with all caps. But if you don't type it that way, Google Sheets will convert it for you, so no worries. Now that I've typed equals sum, I'm going to put in a left parenthesis. And this is pretty typical. After you've typed equals and a function, the next thing you typically do is put in a left parenthesis. Next, I need to indicate to Google Sheets what I want to add up. I could do that in a couple of ways. I could type it out, starting with D2, and going through D24. So equals sum left parenthesis D2 through, do you remember how to indicate through? It's a colon, D24. Now, I'm supposed to put in a right parenthesis and tap enter, but you don't actually have to. If you forget that right parenthesis, Google Sheets will put it in for you. And look, I now have the grand total hours worked for all of these employees. Now, there's another way I could have gotten the same result. I could have started by typing equals, typed in sum, left parenthesis, and instead of typing in D2 through D24, I could have just scrolled up to the top of the range that I want to add up, clicked on D2, and dragged all the way down to D24. Now, you have to be careful not to include the cell that has your formula in it. That will create an error message so fast, your head will spin. So I'm going to stop at D24, tap equals, and I get the same exact result. So that's an alternative way to indicate what you want to be summed. Now I could click maybe right here and type in the word totals, colon, tap enter, and I could click on it and maybe bold it or italicize it. So this will help me remember what these numbers mean. Now I should also sum the taxable income. So let's do that quickly. I'll type equals sum left parenthesis E2 through E24, tap enter, and it's added it up. Now there are other common functions and other common pieces of information that you'll need in Google Sheets. For example, averages. So I'm going to click on C26 and type in average, colon, I'll tap enter, and then I'll type in highest, colon, tap enter, lowest, colon, tap enter, and total employees, colon. And I'll double click between C and D here at the top to stretch out that column so it fits better. I can click and drag to highlight this range and click bold to make them all bolded. Okay, so how could we calculate the average? What is the average number of hours worked for my employees? To do this, I'll type equals, and Google Sheets is anticipating again what I'm going to want to type here. Why? Because the word average is here at the left, it's figured out what I want. But I could stubbornly go ahead and type it in myself, equals average, left parenthesis, D2 through D24, or I could click and drag to highlight that range, tap enter, and the average is calculated. Now notice Google Sheets wants to autofill down the spreadsheet. In this case, that would be a mistake. The rest of these are not averages, so I would not want to autofill this down. I'll X out of that. Instead of autofilling down, I want to autofill to the right. So I'm going to click here on D26, and I'll click on the fill handle and pull to the right, and then release. And now it's calculated the average taxable income for each employee. Now, if you ever want to double check that the formula is producing an accurate result, you can double click on the formula. In this case, it's showing me that it took into account E2 through E24, and it even highlights it in orange in this case, so that I can see what is being averaged. That looks accurate to me. If you double click on it and you see an error, you can fix that here in the formula bar. You can just click and change any element of the formula here in the formula bar. I'll tap escape to get out of that view. And now let's figure out the highest and lowest number in that range. To do this, we're going to use a new function. I'll type equals and max. Now, this time I want to teach you that you can do an auto sum or an auto max or an auto min or average or whatever it is. If Google Sheets figures out exactly what you want to do, just tap enter and it will automatically accept what Google Sheets thinks you want. Now I'll use the fill handle to extend that over to E27, and now I have the highest number of column E. What about the lowest number? The function that gives us the lowest number is min. There it is. Google Sheets figured it out. I'll just tap enter. There's the lowest number. I click on it, use the fill handle to pull it over to E28, and now I get the lowest number in column E. All right, our final function that I'll share with you in this segment of the course is the count function. And what the count function does is it looks at a range that you select and then just counts up the total number of cells in that range that have numbers in them. So if I were to select this range and use the count function, it would produce the number 3. If I were to select this range, it would produce the number 6. So let's give it a try. I'll click on D29, type equals, count, and Google Sheets is giving me a little tip about what it is. It's the number of numeric values in a data set. It's what I just explained to you in different words. I'll put in my left parenthesis, and then I can either type or click and drag to show Google Sheets the range that I want to count up. There it is. I'll tap enter on the keyboard. The total number of employees is 23. Now, technically, that's just the total number of employees that did work in this month, but that definitely still works. Again, I'll use the fill handle to pull it over, but it just gives me the same answer, so I may not even need to do that. In this next segment of Google Sheets for Beginners, the complete course, we're going to focus on how to modify the formatting in the spreadsheet, including how to format numbers and text. We'll also look at formatting cells, rows, and columns, and a couple of tricks that will help you do your formatting more effectively. The first formatting technique I'll teach you is we're going to format some of these numbers. Notice that it's hard to tell sometimes the difference between money, dollars in this case, and just hours worked. They all just look like numbers, so let's change the formatting so that it's obvious what we're dealing with. To do this, I'm going to click on column C, and it's going to select the entire column, and then here on this toolbar, I'm going to go here where it says 1, 2, 3. If I put my mouse on that, it says More Formats. So if I click there, notice that it's automatically deciding what the format of this column should be. And I'm going to go down here and change that to currency. So now all of the hourly wages show up with a $, and I can see that these are wages. In addition to that, notice that Google Sheets gave me a decimal point and 2 zeros at the end of each of these. In this case, I don't need those extra zeros. So I'm going to go here next to the More Formats button, and I'm going to decrease the decimal places. Now notice, as I changed the formatting for this column to be currency, Google Sheets figured out if this column is currency, then this column is also currency. How did it know that? Because the formulas that are in column E make it clear that these results are dependent on these results. And so Google Sheets is smart and figures out that these numbers also are currency. Now instead of currency, I could have changed it to be accounting. And you can see the difference. It still indicates that these are dollars, but because in accounting you have to be absolutely sure about every single number, they like to separate the $sign from the number so it doesn't get confused as being a 1. It just makes it a little easier to read the numbers themselves. So that's another option. We also have financial formatting, and there are other formats as well. Percent, scientific, even things like dates and times, durations, and you can also set up some custom formats. I'm going to hold Control and tap Z to undo some of those changes. But if you want to learn more about the number formats in Google Sheets, you could watch some of my other tutorials and even some of my Microsoft Excel tutorials on cell formats. Now, what about text formats? You'll notice that these names that I've entered into Google Sheets, they are aligned to the left of the cell. If I expand column B, you can see that even better. Numbers tend to be aligned to the right edge of a cell. So whenever you're looking at data, if you see words or numbers that are aligned to the left, they're probably understood to be text. And if you see numbers aligned to the right, they're probably understood to be numbers. But there are times when you might want numbers to be understood as text. If that's the case, you would select that number or a group of numbers, and then go here to the toolbar, click on More Formats, and change the formatting to plain text. Now look what happened. Immediately, those numbers were aligned to the left because they're being treated as text now. I'm going to go ahead and make that change for all of the employee ID numbers. So with that range selected, I'll just switch it to plain text. So this More Formats button is very helpful in how your data is formatted in Google Sheets. You can also get there by going here to the Format menu and choosing number or text, and other formatting options as well. Okay, let's look at another way that we can format the data in a Google Sheet. Let's say I want to format this entire first row so that everything in it is bolded. I think that's a good idea. It helps separate the data in your mind so that you know that these are column headings. There are a couple of ways I could do this. I could do it the slow way by clicking on cell A1, clicking bold, and doing the same for B2, C2, etc. Or I could click and drag to highlight the range that I want to bold. But probably the fastest way to bold all of those column headings is just to click on row number 1. Every cell in row 1 is now highlighted, and I can just click bold. If I wanted to, I could do the same thing for column A. Just click on A, click bold. Sometimes you have to click it twice. If any cell in that range is already bolded, you'll need to click it twice. But very quickly, I can bold a whole range of cells. Another way I could change the formatting in this row, or in any range of cells, would be to click, in this case on row number 1, and I could change its alignment. So if I go here to the toolbar at the top, here is the alignment button. Right now it's set to left align, but I can click and change it to centered. And because I had all of row number 1 selected, all of the column headings are now centered. Just like I showed before, I could click and drag from column A to column E and double click between any two of the column letters to perfectly resize the columns so that all of the data fits. I could also change the background color if I want to for a cell or a range of cells. I could click and drag to highlight the cells. And then here on the toolbar, there is a fill color button, and I could change the fill color for that range. Now there's much more that I could teach you on formatting in Google Sheets. So check out my other videos, both my Google Sheets videos and my Excel videos to learn more. But there's one more powerful feature I can't leave this segment without teaching you, and that is the Format Painter. Let's say, as you're working in Google Sheets, you develop a specific look and formatting that you like, and you want to then apply it somewhere else in your spreadsheet. Maybe in addition to the yellow background color, I like that it's bolded, I want it to also be italicized, or even strike through. Whatever it is, I've developed a specific look, and now I want to apply that same look, let's say, to all of column A. I don't want to have to recreate each element of this formatting that I've put in, so instead, I'll just click on any cell or range of cells that has the formatting I like. And then here on the toolbar in Google Sheets, I'm going to find the Format Painter. If I click on it once, it lets me click on anything to apply that same formatting. So I'm going to click on 1201. Notice what happened. 1201 is now centered, it's italicized, it's bolded, and it has a yellow background. I've effectively painted this same formatting look and feel onto A2. What about A3? If I click on A3, nothing changes. So I would have to go back to D1 or C1, click the Format Painter, and click on A3 to apply that same formatting. But watch this. If you want to apply it to a whole range, all you have to do is click on, let's say, C1, click the Format Painter, and then just click and drag to highlight the range that you want to paint that same formatting onto. And it worked. So those are the basic formatting options and features that you need to know as you get started in Google Sheets. In this next segment of Google Sheets for Beginners, the complete course, I will show you how to create and edit basic charts in Google Sheets. To create a chart, the first thing you'll want to do is click and drag to highlight the key information that you want to chart. In this case, I don't think I need employee number, so I'm going to click here on B1, hold the click, and I'll just drag over all the way to column E and all the way down almost to the bottom of my data set. But I don't need totals, average, I don't need all of these totals. So I'm going to go here and just end right there on E24. And with that range selected, I'm going to go up here to Insert and choose Chart. And look what Google Sheets does. I'm going to zoom out so you can see this a little better. But it's created a chart of all the information I had highlighted. We can see all of the names of the employees. We can see the taxable income in yellow, the hours worked in red, and the hourly wage in blue. Google Sheets has also opened up the chart editor that I can use to make some changes to this chart. Using this chart editor, I could switch from a column chart to, let's say, a smooth line chart, or an area chart, a bar chart. And of course, the chart you need and the one that you should select depends on the data and what you're trying to show, what is the nature of your data, and how best to illustrate that to others. You can switch what the axis is, the x-axis. It could be hourly wage or one of these other options. You can switch the columns and rows. You can see what that does. We could use row 1 as headers, and it looks like that was the default anyway. And we could also use column B as labels, which we are doing already. Notice at the very top of this chart editor, there's an option to create charts for this data. If you click there, it accesses Google Gemini, which is Google's AI tool. And then you can enter a prompt. I typed in compare salaries, and it gave me some options of charts that would illustrate that. I could just click to insert those charts into my Google Sheet. I'm going to go back up to the top of this panel and clear the history, clear, and actually just X out to get back to the chart editor. Notice that there's also a Customize tab here where I can change the chart style, some of the border colors, the layout. I can work on the chart title, the legend for the chart, and more. For now, I'm going to X out of the chart editor, and I'm going to click and drag to scoot this chart over to the side so that it doesn't block my data. So there is more to learn about charts, and you can learn those here in Google Sheets, in the Help menus. You could also watch my other videos to learn more about charts. In this next and final segment of Google Sheets for Beginners, the complete course, I will show you the print options and publishing options for your Google Sheets. First, let's look at the print settings. Google Sheets isn't necessarily meant to be printed on paper, but if I want to print it out on a piece of paper, I could go here to the menu bar and click this print button, or of course you can go to the file menu and choose print, or hold Control and tap P. With any of those methods, it should take you here where you can get ready to print. It gives you a preview of what it will look like. In my case, the data is fitting very well on this paper. But if your spreadsheet is big with lots of columns or lots of rows, you may not be able to fit it all easily on one sheet. So let's look at some options that can help you. First of all, by default, Google Sheets wants to print just the current sheet. If I want to, though, I could say I want all of the workbook to be printed, every sheet. In my case, though, no. Some of those are blank. I don't need to print them. This next option is paper size. If you have a printer with a different paper size, or you want to use bigger paper, smaller paper, you can adjust that here. This next option is very important. In many cases, this will solve your printing problems. Right now, my spreadsheet is set up to be printed in landscape format, and that may be perfect in this case. But in other cases, you'll want portrait so that the page is narrower but taller. So switching this from landscape to portrait or back to landscape, in a lot of cases, that will make sure that your data fits on one page or maybe 10 pages. But the most important thing is that you want all of your columns, if possible, to show up just on one page. If the columns spill out here to the right, it can really mess up the experience of a printed spreadsheet. Another option we have is to scale the data down or up to fit the width that we have. If we switch to normal, you can see what happens. The data is not fitting on one page. So fit to width is probably what I want here. You could also fit to height, or you could fit to page so that everything gets squished down so that it fits on one page no matter what. To do this, in some cases, your data will go really small. The text will be tiny just so that you can fit it onto one page. So you'll really need to think about that. Fit to page is nice in many cases, but in others, it just ruins the experience of looking at your data. Another thing to try is adjusting the margins. I could go to narrow margins. That gives me more space to work with, or wide margins. I get less space for my data. I'll just go with normal, and then I can change whether my grid lines show up or not, and any notes that I've written. In my case, there are no notes in the spreadsheet. I can center my data or align it to the left more or to the right. In this case, it's not making much difference. I can also align to the bottom, the center, or the top of the page. Finally, we can add headers and footers. Maybe I want page numbers. If your data is going to be printed onto multiple pages, I highly recommend adding page numbers. You could also add a workbook title, even the sheet name, current date, current time. All of these headers and footers can be very handy if you're going to print your spreadsheet. When you've made your selections, you can click Next and prepare to print. Make sure that the right printer is selected and you've decided whether or not you want black and white or color, how many copies, etc., and then click Print. So now that we've looked at how to print a spreadsheet in Google Sheets, let's look at how to publish the sheet. One of the options we have in Google Sheets is to go here to File and choose Download. I could download this Google Sheets spreadsheet as an Excel spreadsheet. It will convert it into a .xlsx file, and that would work natively in Microsoft Excel. There are other options as well, including a web page. I could download this spreadsheet as an HTML web page, ready to be uploaded into a website file server kind of thing, so that it could become a web page. One of the best options we have is to download it as a PDF, and I'll go ahead and do that. Again, I get some settings, including some of those same options that we saw earlier, and now I can just click Export, and it downloads this Google Sheet as a PDF. One of the best things about PDFs is they're accessible on any computer. You don't have to have any special software to be able to read a PDF. So that's one way that I guess you could say we could publish this Google Sheet. Another way is through the sharing settings, and you can get to those here in the upper right, or also in that same file menu, you can go to Share to get those same options. Let's look first in the upper right. If I click Share, I can add specific people with whom I want to share this Google Sheet. In addition to that, I can think about creating a link. In fact, there's already a link. I can just click Copy, and then I could share that link with people. But if I do, notice that they will be restricted from viewing the actual Google Sheet. Only people with access can open with the link. So I might think about switching from restricted to anyone with the link. At that point, if I copy the link and share it with people, anyone that clicks that link will be able to see my Google Sheet. Notice that it says Viewer here. They will only be able to view it. If I switch it to Commenter, they'll be able to comment. Makes sense. If I switch it to Editor, I'm basically making them co-creators with me of this spreadsheet. They'll be able to make changes. They'll be able to delete information, add information. So you really need to be careful and think through these options. When you're done, click Done, and your Google Sheet will be shared the way you've chosen to share it. Now, there's another option for publishing here in the File menu. If I click File and go to Share, there's an option to publish to the web. So this would make this into basically a web page, live on the internet. It says, make your content visible to anyone by publishing it to the web. You can link to or embed your document. I think I'll link to it, the entire document, and I want the document to become a web page. There are some extra settings here that I could change or look at. This is an important one. Automatically republish when changes are made. I'm happy with that, so I'll click Publish. Are you sure you want to publish? I am. So I click OK. And now I get a link for my now public web page. I'm going to click Close, and I'll open a new tab and go to that public web page so you can see what it looks like. Sheet number 1 is blank, but if we go to sheet number 2, there's the data I've been working on. So those are the printing and publishing options that we have available in Google Sheets. So congratulations. At this point, you have completed Google Sheets for Beginners, the complete course. At this point, you have everything that you need to know to use Google Sheets effectively. Yes, there's more that you could learn, but you have all the basics that you need to be successful. If you're ready to take your next step in your Google Sheets journey, I recommend that you next watch my Google Drive for Beginners, the complete course. You'll get a little bit of a review of what I've taught you in this course, but it'll also open up to you the rest of the Google Drive ecosystem. You'll see how Google Sheets interfaces with other applications and how it works in Google Drive. In addition to the Google Drive for Beginners complete course, I have many other shorter Google Sheets tutorials that can help you to learn even more about Google Sheets. I would also like to challenge you to consider watching my Excel tutorials. My most popular video is Excel for Beginners, the complete course, and much of what you would learn about Excel is also applicable to Google Sheets. In addition to that video, I have dozens and dozens of other Excel videos that are going to be applicable to you as Google Sheets users. So consider checking those out. In the future, I plan to make a video called Google Docs for Beginners, the complete course, and another called Google Slides for Beginners, the complete course. So watch for those additional Google complete courses. But for now, thanks for watching. I hope you found this video to be helpful. If you did, please like, follow, and subscribe. And when you do, click the bell and you'll be notified when I post another video. If you'd like to support my channel, the best way to do that is to become a channel member, but you could also click the thanks button below the video. You could support me through my Patreon account or by buying channel merch, and you'll see information about those options in the description below the video. Speaking of supporting the channel, thank you to my Super Techie channel supporters. I really appreciate you. One last thought. Would you please share this video with other people that you think it might be beneficial to? I would really appreciate it.